Hi, everybody. Welcome to our latest episode of Let's Be Direct. This is a regular Lane Access podcast where we look into all things supply chain, trucking, and the future of the industry, which, as we always say, is going direct. I'm Andrew Rivera, head of marketing for Lane Access, joined again by my colleagues Johnny Nguyen, head of Shipper Partnerships, and Rick Burnett, the famous Rick Burnett, CEO and founder of Lane Access. All right, guys, today's topic, interesting one. It's about the importance of data in the industry. Now, you guys know as well as anyone, we live in an age where companies across all industries, not just trucking, but pretty much every segment on the planet is obsessed with data and data-driven insights and actionable business intelligence based on data. What we also know is that the trucking industry is notoriously behind the times when it comes to technology, right? EDI is still widely used, and that's a technology that was really born in the early 70s, still used. The trucking industry still largely relies on phone calls, emails, faxes, believe it or not. I don't even know where you can buy a fax anymore except on some antique website. But it's really, over the last decade, trucking is starting to catch up, and the importance of supply chain data has really been brought to the fore. So I think we can all agree on that. So Rick, I'm going to start with you, and it's really a broad question, kind of broken up into three parts. A, why is data so important in the supply chain? What type of data is the most important in the supply chain? And who benefits the most from supply chain data? Big umbrella, but go for it.
Well, there's different parties that are interested in data. So if you are a shipper or manufacturer, the first thing you want to look at data is for your forecasting. How much is my freight cost going to cost, over this next quarter or next year? And so you are looking at your lanes, trying to analyze your rates, and trying to forecast and build that freight cost into, your costing. And then if you are, a trucking company, you're trying to analyze, your revenue potential and your movements based on season flow and freight demands historically and things like that. So, and then there's all kinds of other service providers into transportation supply chain, because this is, as you know, the largest industry. It's $1 trillion industry in the U.S. And so, tires and maintenance and fuel and insurance and all the other different entities that provide service into, supply chain are all looking at data. And one of the, beyond the shipper manufacturer, probably insurance companies are one of the other large data driven, so that they can cost it out effectively and make sure that they can turn a profit, but then cover themselves so that they don't have too much exposure and then put themselves out there into risk that they can't manage, right? So, there's a lot of different parties. It's a massive industry. And, then there is service providers into the industry that provide statistical data, indexes and various different things like that people try to take that data and analyze that data in order to make decisions. And I think, so in order for this conversation to, materialize, I think we have to look at what data are we talking about and who's that data for? And then ultimately, where are they getting that data? Because I challenge a lot of the transportation industry when they're looking at data is, where is the source? And that's the interesting part, because people, in my opinion, are analyzing data that is just data that isn't real. It's an input data, and it's not a real-time data. And now there is capability today to have a conversation of analyzing real-time data that we couldn't have when I started a decade ago.
Well, and that speaks again to the reliability of the data. We're now in the age of Web3. Lane Access has built our own private blockchain. There's so many sources that pour into these rate indexes, and there's dozens of rate indexes, there's dozens of rate calculators. But again, how reliable is the source? Is this data being input in real time? Can it be manipulated? And so talk to that, if you will, particularly as we enter this new age of immutable data, which is what blockchain is all about.
Yeah, I mean, so by definition, blockchain software, immutable ledger software. And so in essence, what it is that the core part of the data that is real time, that's on the actual truck that's reporting this information, is then pushed to software, which is an immutable ledger, the blockchain, that then pushed to an immutable ledger and then stored on the blockchain, which now has an immutable archival record, so that, you know, let's say 5, 7, 10 years down the road, and every movement is done in real time and it's reported from the actual truck. It's not an input. And so that data then is reported to an immutable ledger and stored on a blockchain. You will then have real statistical data information in transportation that you can analyze that isn't there today.
Yeah. Actually, going back to shipper data, another subset that I feel is very important that shippers are looking for is compliance or risk mitigation data, such as looking into, because we talked in previous episodes a lot about double brokering and so forth. So checking out carriers, their backgrounds, looking at trends of, such as a common trend is how soon after they open up in the DOT, looking at their driving histories and so forth. So I think for shippers, another thing they looked for out there is also data to help them make a decision on which carrier they should choose to do contracts with.
Well, and even that has two components, right? So you have one component, which is the risk assessment in terms of safety and what the government is reporting.
Right.
And those reporting crash indicators and DUIs and other things, you know, it's public information that you can now pull and receive. Mm-hmm. And that's on any DOT licensed carrier, because they've 2010 they launched CSA 2010, which is 7 basics, and had an initiative to really push information out there to help provide safety measurements to shippers and different people that are doing business. The other side of that is the area that is really the black hole, and that is the performance of this 97%. Because when you look at transportation and you really are being honest about what is actually data and you're really looking at it, then you have to look at transportation as a whole and what makes up transportation and how is the reporting being done on the industry itself. And so when you get a performance, say you're a major shipper and you're looking at, and you have 50 to 75 contracted carriers and you're looking at your carrier performance, I would challenge you that you're looking at data that isn't real. Now, yeah, you might have EDI on the truck and they have a Qualcomm system and they're reporting electronically, and that is true. But we know statistically, if you go look at purchase transportation, and these are public information, this isn't our opinion, this is factual information that's being reported, that 35 to 50% of these loads are being subcontracted out. That's where you have a problem with the data. Yeah. Because this is coming from a source, it's tendered to a mega carrier, and then the mega carrier, for various different reasons that they report, right, on their annual reports as capacity constraints and various other things, that they subcontracted out, right? And so when they subcontracted out, this black hole, which is the 97%, don't have these reporting capabilities. So who's inputting this data of the performance of this subcontracted carrier?
The mega carriers, right?
Yeah, well, it's a dispatcher that's saying the guy got there at 9 o'clock. Well, didn't he or didn't he?
User input.
That guy could be an hour away, but he knows the performance of the measurements he's got to do. So what's he going to do? He don't status it at 9. Now, if you're analyzing that data, the question is, if you have 50 or 75 locations, are your locations analyzing each one of your loads that's being picked up every week and looking and matching the performance of basically what happened to what was reported? I challenge you probably are. And if you're not, then you're not looking at real data. Because until you can get that black hole into reporting real-time information that then can be stored in an immutable ledger that's on a blockchain, that you can start analyzing every year what your freight cost is and what you're paying out, and things that's actionable data that you can measure off of. I mean, and if shippers look at their transportation spend, and if they're not every year reducing their transport, and not by giving an RFP for the next quarter or for the next year of these lanes.
Right.
That's not a cost-effective way to manage a train, because you already know that of 1,000 loads, there's 350 loads to 500 loads a day that are being subcontracted out. You are paying at least 20 to 30, 40% per load on every one of those. It's just math. And if 97% of this industry is smaller independent, then 97% of this data, because there's no network and there's no electronic real-time tracking of the inputs of the data, is data that is being input in some form of fashion. And so when we look at all the different people that measure indexes and all this other freight, my challenge is, where is the rates coming from? I mean, if we know there's $200 billion of managed fees, are you reporting what the shipper's paying? Or are you reporting what the carrier's getting? And the end carrier that actually is doing the work.
Right.
Right? Because that difference between there and is miles apart from what the cost is or to what the cost is over here. Right?
Well, and I would add that so much of that data from those third-party transportation providers, brokers, it's siloed. I mean, they don't share data with each other, right? So how can you get a complete picture of what's really going on out there when everyone is siloing their own data?
Well, and
it's not centralized or going to any kind of databases or. Yeah.
And a lot of those guys, quite frankly, work together. And they're working in conjunction of the data that they're analyzing, and they're all, because they are a margin-driven business. That's just the fact. They're never going to push efficiency like we're doing, because we have no skin in the game in the rates. The two parties that's involved in it are the ones that are negotiating direct. So whatever that cost is the same. So if every load was running like a lane access model where it's direct, you would guarantee to know exactly what the costing was. Because this shipper's paying 1,000 and this carrier's getting 1,000. Now there is a transaction fee, but that has nothing to do with the rates of the freight. So you're going to there will be on down the road, when there is a pure direct network, you will be able to tell what the refrigerated rates are at this particular area. You will take a drive-in, flatbed, whatever else, because the two parties that are involved in this are contracting and negotiating and paying direct. And then what you have is, you can run seasonal, you can run whatever you want. That data is then stored on an immutable ledger. It's on the blockchain. So you'll be able to archive 2 years ago what it was in this particular area at this particular time frame. So because right now there's $200 billion worth of fees in the middle, and it's at least that, right? And I don't know if purchase transportation and all that cost is in that $200 billion, but it's substantial, right? And that's really 20% of what we say is a $1 trillion industry, okay? And so the point of data is, all of us use it in our lives for various different reasons. Companies use it to make decisions. And the reason that the supply chain is still chaotic and all these issues are there is because nobody is really pushing efficiency into this network. And even the so-called competitors to lane access that have come up in the past, None of them are a pure model. None of them. They all give a rate to a shipper and they subcontract it out. And you can list them all. So we can stand alone in the purity form of a transportation movement, and we can say that we will provide the purest form of a data and transportation because it's the purest form of the move. That part there is non-negotiable. You can't argue that point.
Right, and specifically because the data that we're generating is targeting the 97% of the industry that's actually moving the freight.
Well, it's
So
targeting
you're not gonna
whoever
get
has
more
the,
accurate than that.
it's targeting whoever is. It could be a large trucking company,
Right.
that is contracting directly with the shipper, and they're negotiating with them. So the truck size isn't important to lane access because we are a platform. Yes, our target is the 97% because nobody's ever targeted them and nobody has any data on them. So yeah, it's the most challenging, and we get resistance really from all parties that have interested relationships in transportation, even outside fuel and different stuff. They're apprehensive to do stuff with lane access because they already have negotiated contracts with these larger people. Now they're outdated, dinosaur processes, but they're huge because they control the industry. Look, it's all going to shift. It will shift. Just like Blockbuster was on every corner. There is no way that people thought 10 years ago there wouldn't be a Blockbuster anymore. Now you can't find it. So there's one in Bend, Oregon. So unless you go there, wherever you're at to rent your movies, you're getting them online.
Museum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more of a novelty why
Yeah.
people go.
Yeah.
It
It's
is.
a tourist attraction is what it is.
Exactly.
Netflix. It's funny. Netflix actually made a movie about it, and and that was the irony in it, right?
Yeah.
A blockbuster movie.
So I hope I'm not cutting you off here. So I think it's critical to understand that what you mentioned are two aspects to performance. One is safety, and then one is actual performance metrics. You mentioned CSA 2010. Okay, that was designed to increase safety on the part of drivers. Well, statistically, data-wise, it hasn't worked. It's gotten worse. In the last 10 years, there have been more fatal truck crashes. Recently, I think 2021 or 22 was the last time they measured it, compared to 2010 when CSA was employed. So, frankly, I think HOS, hours of service, has at least some part into this because guys are racing to their next destination before they run out of hours. And that, in my view, not only my view, I've seen this out there stated that the HOS is actually contributing to the crash problem. Now,
The ELDs.
and the ELDs, yeah.
Yeah,
But
specifically the ELDs.
Yeah.
Because hours of service has always been there, and they did it paper logs. But the ELDs, which is electronic logging device, which
Right.
is measuring this,
Right.
you know.
Right, but they're looking at the clock and they're seeing how
Yes.
much time they have. So I do want to kind of run through some metrics that I saw from different sources when they're looking at a trucking company and get your take on what's valid, what's missing. On-time pickup, obvious. On-time delivery, obvious. Damage-free delivery, pretty obvious. Accurate documentation on the part of the trucking company. There are some other ones that you don't maybe see too often, but fallouts, which are basically loads that a carrier accepted and then for whatever reason they abandoned. Obviously, the more fallouts you have, the less attractive you're going to be to a shipper. Transit times, and that can drill down again to what we've talked about, transit times per lane or average transit time per carrier, both important metrics. So I want to bring this up because this is critically important. And this study was done just a couple of years ago. They surveyed about 1,000 shippers, and only 6% of those shippers said that they had full visibility over their supply chain. 6%. It's 94% who do not have full visibility over their supply chain. And with this glut of data and glut of technology, how can that number be that high? And look, again, lane access, what we do is we take all those metrics and we store them in real time including giving the shippers full visibility and transparency, because that 94% number has got to go down. The technology is there. Lane Access has it.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, actually, I think it should be 97%.
Yeah.
Because that's the industry. So they're actually doing good because they're gaining 3% of what the industry is. And the point is this, is that until major shippers get involved in supply chain and they're going to have to take off their suit and put on a t-shirt and figure out where they can cut transportation costs. And when they do that, they're going to start looking at how operationally supply chain is contracted and where the rates are represented and who's actually on that freight and what is the data they're actually on and how does that data come. And I could send them a list of 10 things that they probably don't know any of it. And if they start drilling in there, that's going to be the top 10. And they're going to start looking at, and then they're going to start figuring out, and you're talking about millions of dollars per company in reduction of cost. These aren't made up numbers. I mean, it's per thousand. So if you're moving 1,000 loads, statistically that 350 to 500 of those loads are being subcontracted out. It's just provable math of reporting. So if you look at that and you look at how much, if you're paying, on an average of 2,000 loads or $2,000 and you got 1,000 loads, you're $2 million a day in freight spend. Well, if you got the low end, let's say you have 350 loads that you're paying a 20% low end 20% margin, right? On a $2,000 load. Well, what is that? $400, right? So you're paying $400 times 350. What is that number? I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm just saying, somebody got a calculator? Run it. Somebody got a calculator? No, run it. Where's my phone? It's over there. Anyway, that would be a good number to know, but it's a couple $100,000, whatever it is. So the point is that is a pure savings that they can take off because the people that are doing the work is already giving you the performance. Yeah. It's being reported to you. You're analyzing your performance and they're doing the input. It's not real, but they're close because you're not raising stink because they're not on time and they're not whatever else, right? So they're giving you the performance. So you're getting 350 loads a day that you're paying somebody to just basically pass paperwork and not give you real data. Those are factual statements. And so until larger company, but the minute that larger C-level companies start to figure this out and they really want to cut costs and they really want to, and really it's not really cut cost, it's cutting inefficiency. It's inefficient today in today's environment to bid out lanes and send an RFQ or an RFP and get tens of lanes or thousands, hundreds of lanes and getting quotes from different people and then awarding it, or a UPS that locks up, peak season capacity and pays a premium for these trucks so they don't have to worry about it and they make sure that their stuff gets when they could get all this stuff in real time. It's inefficient. How long you been doing that? Forever. So if they don't challenge themselves to start thinking differently, they're not going to move their company forward in cost savings and being competitive. So the market leaders will be the people that start to move, because transportation is 30% of your spend. So the ones that come early to direct network and start to go all in, those are going to be the people those would be the people that I'd be buying stock on, because they're going to have higher profitability because they had a major reduction in their costs that's going to come every quarter. Those are facts.
Then to be just
Crystal clear in terms of the missing data right now for a shipper to make better decisions would you say is a performance rating?
I think the missing data is data they don't even know. They haven't even looked at data, real data, to find out that the data that they're looking at isn't real data. That's their problem. They think that they're analyzing, they're very logistically sound by having 65 plant locations and having 10 contracted carriers, or having multiple different locations and having 75 contracted carriers. They think that that is a logistically sound operation because they performance and they get all this other stuff. What they don't do is they don't actually go out to the distribution centers or have a data guy go out to every distribution center and write down the trucks that's coming in and out of there, and then match those trucks that's coming in and out of there for a day compared to how many of those that they have a direct contract with. And if in that day they have 300 trucks come in in there and 167 of them are different trucks, that means they're independent. Well, if you don't have a contract with them independent, that means you're paying at least 20% per load on every one of those. That's where they start, because then they can be honest within themselves and honest within them how they're analyzing data and where they're looking at cost, and then they can really start to cost out and figure out their transportation spent. Until they go to that level, they're we talk to them and who are we, right? And here's a 30-40 billion dollar company, but it's pride before the fall, always. And they've never really looked within themselves to think differently. And this is a new age. Right. Transportation, we are in the front end of this movement. Now, we've been out ahead for a long time. But in this paradigm shift that's going to be happening in these next 5 years, there's going to be more and more movements of independents coming to this network. And there's going to be more and more shippers who come into this movement because it's too much economic benefit and there's too much value in the tech stack. And as that shift happens, there probably will be an Amazon Prime, and there probably will be other, YouTube and various different things. Netflix was the brand of people that rented movies, right? Because they took out, the Blockbuster. And what Lane Access wants to be is we want to be the brand. We want to be the independent brand to where they come to this network, they get benefits beyond just direct freight. They get other network benefits, but it gives them the brand of where you want to go direct, go to Lane Access and tell your shipper and bring your shipper directly, because you can carve off and get paid direct, and then you get other benefits by joining the network.
Couple of follow-up questions, but slight tangent. Driver privacy. Now, for a long time, drivers just fought against what they consider the incursion of their privacy, especially in the cabs. But that was really pre-smartphone, pre-ELD, pre their own company's technology, pre-social. Have we finally gotten past that tipping point of drivers protesting the invasion of their privacy to gather this data?
No, that ship sailed. Yeah, it's over. And a couple of reasons why. A driver never cared if he was being tracked and different stuff when he was on a load. He understands it. That's business. But it was the perception of tracking when he was on his personal time. And that's the part that infringes on the privacy, which I don't disagree. Okay? And so what is a reality of today is ELDs are here, and they're probably here to stay. And so they know that when they come into trucking or they stay into trucking, that they're under a rule of operating the truck in a measurement that's electronic, that can't really be manipulated. And so that part of it is what it is. They know that if they're going to drive a truck, that they're going to deal with that. And then, outside of that, as far as the privacy and things like that, because there is a new wave in trucking, and most of these guys have TikToks or YouTubes or Instagrams or different, it's not as much as because they're a social platform they utilize. They show their truck, they show their bed in their cab, they show their, and so it's more prevalent that these guys are sharing than holding back. And so I think in the years to come, these guys are going to monetize as much in the social and digital side as they are in the trucking side.
Yeah.
So one more tangential question, and this is something that popped in my head, and I don't know how standard this is. This is obviously in your wheelhouse, but is it fair, do you think, for shippers to want to see the financials of these small trucking companies? Now, obviously, the mega carriers are public companies, publicly traded. We've seen the financial statements from C.H. Robinson and J.B. Hunt. They're making billions in revenue every year. Fine. But for the 98% that own just a handful of trucks, and all those owner-operators who own just a single truck, look, a lot of them are still going out of business in mass numbers, including this year. Is it reasonable for a shipper to, and these little companies I don't think are being traded on the New York Stock Exchange, so they're private enterprises. Is it reasonable, fair for a shipper to want to see a small carrier's financials?
I don't think they need to, and I don't think they will as the network grows, because they won't care. Ultimately, what's a shipper want? He wants to make sure that the guy he's under contract he gives a load to is a good, reliable carrier. That's where data comes in, right? And he's going to be more interested in his data and his performance than he is in financials. He's not going to care if the guy pays $5.50 for a gallon of gas or he pays $4. He's not going to tell him, hey, you should start buying your gas cheaper. Hey, you should start buying your paper at a different vendor, or you should start eating salad instead of eating whatever. He's not going to get. That's not the point of looking at financials, right? You're looking at stability of a trucking company. That's going to go on performance, because when he contracts with him, who's at risk? The shipper's at risk because he's got to pay him, right? And so if there is data behind this trucking company and he's run 100 loads through the system and they look, oh, he's on time, he doesn't, they're going to be comfortable. Right now, there's no insight. So what are they? They're trying to come up with, they know they need to expand their carrier base, because that's why they go to load boards or they go to brokers every day, because they can't manage a direct relationship with hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of smaller independent carriers. That's what Lane Access does. So they can come to Lane Access and they can say, in essence, we can run financials, which is basically premium carriers that we're comfortable with, but there is thousands at my becking call, if I will, at contracting, and the system will manage it. So now, in essence, the guy's not going to care what his financials is, because he's going to care about performance. Is the guy going to pick it up and is he going to deliver it? Is the stuff going to be safe and does he have insurance to cover it? That's what he cares about, right? And outside of that, the shipper comes in every morning and goes, what's the exceptions? Show me the 3 to 5 loads that are having a problem, and he's going to fix them. The other 999 doing what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, great. I want to hear from them. Got picked up and delivered. Yep. These are the 3 to 5 I got to work on. And that's, hey, we got to make sure, because that's going to miss a sort, or that's going to miss this, or it's got assembly line's going to miss this, and we got to get somebody over there, and they're getting that. But all the rest of them are going to run. So I don't think in the future shippers are going to go into the level of financials. I think they're going to look at data, just like a credit score is. It's a risk assessment. It gives you the confidence to lend him the money or not. And if you do it, if he's a little bit less, you're going to charge him more to cover yourself, so you're getting it back quicker. And if he is a good, you're on that. And so the network, though, is going to have you hundreds of thousands of options. And that's the point, because if you're uncomfortable with one, or he doesn't do it, what do? You block him. I mean, it's that simple. Because as a shipper, when you send the rate confirmation to the network, what happens? Payment is secured. It's held in escrow. And if you want to pay in 30, 45, 60 days, that's fine. You're going to get, through our partner, Transcap, you're going to get a liquidity line of credit to the network so that, upon the rate confirmation, payment is paid in there, because when you order something online, you pay for it. It's the business process, right? You can't order something and go, hey, I'm going to pay in a month. I'm going to pay in 2 months. It's not the way it works. When you order the truck, you got to pay for it because they got a business to run. They're the ones that's fronting all the costs to move your product.
Yeah.
So if you want them to move your product, then you should be comfortable enough to secure that they're going to be paid upon at 24 hours after they deliver it. That's smart business. Why? Because you're building a relationship. Both sides win. It's not one-sided. The carrier wants to give you a good performance because he wants to keep getting loads, and he wants to do a good job so both sides are coming together in this direct connection, and he knows that after he delivers load in 24 hours, the payment's released to his account. You don't have to factor. You don't have to. Another thing that costs him money. So everything that's designed in transportation today is to take from the 97%. And everybody's built their back on them taking the risk. Everybody. And the minute that large shippers figure out that, oh, hey, I did the analysis, I did the research, I did the data, I went and saw how many of my locations are being subcontracted out. I know what I'm paying per month on an average, and I'm paying $2.5 million in cost every month by subcontracting, right? And we only make 14, 18, 25,000, 30, 40,000 by paying it in 30 or 45 days. It's more, we still, by paying them a liquidity and paying them at the time that 24 hours later, and the payment's secured in the process, they're still saving millions of dollars compared to paying it in 30, 45 days, because they're paying it in 30, 45 days because they're using the money. Everybody knows that. It's not a secret, right? But when they carve off this subcontracted freight and they're going direct and they're getting real data, what happens? They're still saving millions and millions and millions of dollars because they're going to the entities that's actually doing the work.
Okay, powerful point to end on. Guys, I think I'm all dated out. Might have zeros and ones leaking out of my ear. But another good conversation. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us for this latest episode of Let's Be Direct. Stay safe out there on the roads, and we will see you next time.